Hi everyone, hope you had a good weekend. Here is today's lesson. We're going to be doing our last week of popular music this week, so we're bringing the topic to an end now and doing a lot of recap and review. So first of all, for the do now, here are a collection of questions that we've been getting wrong in some of the quizzes, so I've collected them here. So pause the video now and see if you can get the right answers for these ones. Okay, let's go through these answers. Change coloured pen. And we know that syllabic is when the vocal part has one note per syllable. For example, in the song Happy Birthday. The opposite of syllabic is melismatic, and that's when there's lots of runs and there's lots and lots of notes per syllable in the vocal part. When someone makes up music on the spot, it's called improvising or improvisation. And the structure of Since You've Been Gone is verse chorus form, and you can say that there's a contrasting bridge section. A perfect cadence goes from chords 5 to 1 and often comes at the end of a phrase. And a short melodic idea that grabs your attention and comes back at various points is called a hook. A hook is not the same as a riff, because a riff is a repeating musical pattern that continuously repeats. But a hook might only be played once or twice at the beginning and then come back between verse 1 and the chorus, or come back later in the bridge or something. It's not necessarily something that repeats over and over again like a riff does, so don't get those two confused. Okay, so today we're going to be listening to Since You've Been Gone so that we can revise its key features. We did this at the end of last term and at the beginning of this term, but it'd be really good now that we're up to the half term to really cement and practice our knowledge that we have about this song. So first of all, this is a really quick little recap. Pause the video and see how many of these little things you can remember without even looking at your score or looking at your notes. What can you remember about this song without listening to it? Off you go. Okay, let's see how many of these you got right, and I did give you the options, so hopefully all 5. For the first one, it is definitely in the major key because it's a very happy song. Well, it sounds happy. The time signature is 4/4 because there are 4 beats in a bar. The harmony is mostly diatonic. Diatonic means all the notes are in the key. And the key of this piece is G major, and most of the notes that we have are in G major. The song structure, we did this in the do now, is verse chorus, you know that. Strophic would be if there were only verses, but there's definitely a chorus with the word Since You've Been Gone in it, so it's definitely verse chorus form. And it's written for a rock band, not a jazz band. Okay. So I want you to make this table on a sheet of paper, or it doesn't have to be perfect or exactly like this table looks, but just make sure you've got these sections so you can write intro on the left, then write its bar number, then write what key the intro's in, then the chords that happen in the intro, and then what devices or features or characteristics happen in the intro, and do it for every section. Don't labour over this or take ages. Just use your score this time, use your notes that you have in your folder, and really collate everything that we've done on this in this really, really good table format, because I think it will make it really clear for you if you have it all on one sheet in front of you. Again, as I said, don't worry if it's not perfect, because I'll show you in a second what we will be using. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go to jot some ideas in each of those boxes using your notes and your score. I'm now going to show you a completed version of this table on the next slide. And actually, you have a copy of this completed version in your booklet for your set works. I think it's after the notes that we made. This is actually printed in there for you. So you've got this in there. And this is such an important sheet. It's kind of like a knowledge organizer for this set work. It's going to be really important that we know all of the things that are on the sheet. And that includes these chord progressions. Okay, we definitely need to know the key signatures. We definitely need to know the keys of each section. You need to know when it modulates, and we know that modulates means changes key. The devices are going to be really useful things that might come up in your exam next year, and the chord sequences definitely will come up as well in the exam. Don't worry too much about bar numbers for now, but we need to have this key information here being learnt at the moment, okay? So you've got that in your notes, and you've got the version that you just wrote down as well. Okay, another thing that's in your booklet is these 2 pages of vocabulary, which we started learning at the end of last term. I want you to go to these 2 pages, and some of you, like Fessel, I think you already completed all of these. So some of you already have these columns filled in. But if you don't, I want you to look up the meanings of the words on the left. Use things like BBC Bitesize, Google, your textbook to find out the meanings. Write your own meaning in words that you understand on the right, and then have a go at finding in the score where they come up. When we go back to school, or I see you next, we will be going through these, so don't worry, we'll check them then. But I think it'd be really good kind of research exercise for you to have to look up these words. A lot of them you might know already, like solo, we know what that means. Syllabic, melisma, octave, we know what that means. But there's a couple of these that you might have to look up. So fill in these 2 pages, pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay, so now that we've done those things in our booklet, I want us to go back onto some clean lined paper, and we're going to do some practice questions now. So find Since You've Been Gone, link to Since You've Been Gone in the description box at the bottom of this video, and listen to the first half of the song, pause the video and answer the following 4 questions. Okay, let's go through the answers to these questions. Swap coloured pens. The repeated chord progression that we hear at the beginning goes da 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 da, and it keeps going for a long time, so we know that that's called a riff. These chords are just made of the root and the fifth. There's no third in the chord, so that's called a power chord. And the chord progression goes G, D, D, E minor, C, C, G, D, E, C, 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 D, D, and it carries on like that. So those are the 4 chords, G, D, E minor, C. And the repeated quavers throughout verse 1 are being played by the keyboard. Hopefully you could hear that. The texture throughout the song is homophonic, which is melody and accompaniment. So you've got the melody in either the vocal part or the lead guitar part, and then the accompaniment, which is in the guitars, bass guitar and piano the whole way through, or keyboard. And the person who composed this song was called Russell Ballard. Maybe you thought that was a bit of a random question for me to include, but they do ask those types of questions in GCSE papers, and I've been looking at some past papers and trying to model these questions on the way that they ask them in the exam, and you might get a question like that. So it's really important that you are remembering key bits of the information of the context of the song, as well as the actual musical characteristics of it as well. Okay, so make sure we've got those marked, and we've got one more question now. So pause the video, listen to the second half now of Since You've Been Gone, so from about, halfway through to the end, and answer these questions. Okay, swap coloured pens, let's go through these answers now. So the section that this chord progression comes from, and I hope you're quite familiar with this now, is of course the bridge, because it is not the same chord sequence as is in the introduction and choruses or in the verses. So hopefully you could really clearly see that this is from the bridge section. Maybe you had to use your score or the table that we did a second ago to help you fill in the chords, but here are the chords that you should have filled in. And the keys that the chord progression modulates to are C major and E minor, and then it moves to D at the end. How did I know this? Because we know that modulations are indicated by cadences, and specifically perfect cadences. In the do now, we recap that a perfect cadence moves from chord 5 to 1. So let's look at where the 5 to 1 chord sequence happens in this progression. Here's the first one. From chord G to chord C is a movement from 5 to 1, so that's why we've modulated to C major. Now we're looking for 5 to 1 in E minor. Where is it? Oh, there it is. From chord B to E minor. And then at the end, it's moving to D, and that is the A is going to be the chord 5 that then moves to D in the bar after, but that's not in this chord progression. So that's why I know that those are the keys that it modulates to, because there's a chord 5 to 1 progression, which cadences in a perfect way, a perfect cadence into the new key. Who provides the melody during the first playing of this progression? And that's the melody that goes da 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 da. And the first time that happens, it's the lead guitar. And then the second time that the chord progression happens, it's the lead vocals. If you will come back, or whatever the words are. Lastly, the keyboard's music during this section is, I'll give you, you needed 2 marks for this, and I'll give you 4 points to choose from, so hopefully you got 2 of those. It's got really, really fast notes throughout, and if you were looking at the score, you would have seen that those are semi-quaver notes. And they're continuous, they carry on the whole way through this bridge section. These are broken chords, so instead of just chords played on the piano, he was playing every single note separately, dum 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 dum, like that, instead of all at the same time. And hopefully you could hear that. It's got a really wide range. It's going from very, very high in the piano to very, very low. And it sounds pretty improvised. And actually on the score, let me find it. It says this part is an approximation of what Don Airey played. So he was playing something along those lines. So pretty improvised by the sounds of it. He was improvising those broken chords. Okay, so hopefully you've got all those answers marked there. And now that brings us to the end of the video. So I'd like you to go back to the Show My Homework lesson and complete the quiz for today's lesson.